and welcome. My name is Claire and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin and I introduce you to our guest speakers, I would first like to acknowledge that the University of Melbourne's Parkville campus is on the lands of the Wurundjeri people who've been custodians of this land for over 40,000 years. The university has other campuses and sites around Victoria too, so today we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Wurundjeri elders, past, present, and those traditional owners of our other campuses, and to those whose lands it is, wherever you are joining us from today. My name is Claire Bingley. I'm one of the regional managers here at the University of Melbourne, and we're thrilled that you could join us for this session about the Bachelor of Science. We congratulate you on your offer to study with us in the Bachelor of Science next semester. And while many of you may have hoped to be able to join us in person this July, it's with the beauty of technology and great adaptation that you will instead be able to kickstart your studies remotely. You'll be able to get to know your new classmates and make new friends. You can meet your peer mentor, join clubs and societies, and establish academic and industry connections. We hope that attending this session, as well as other sessions that are a part of the Welcome to Melbourne series, will add to your anticipation and excitement about joining the University of Melbourne community. And we look forward to being able to welcome you to our beautiful campus sometime in the near future. So this evening, we'll give you a closer look at how remote learning will work for you as a student in the Bachelor of Science next semester. And to do that, we're joined today by Associate Professor Deb King. Deb is the Director of the Bachelor of Science degree and a passionate teacher of mathematics and a researcher in applied mathematics. Joining Deb, we have two of our current science students, Massimo and Jasper. Massimo is studying our electrical systems major and Jasper is taking a psychology major as well as the concurrent diploma of computing, and is also the newly elected president of the Science Student Society. So both students are in their third and final year of the Bachelor of Science degree, and they have some really valuable insights to share with you about their remote learning experience. Now, don't forget, you can post any questions you have in the Q&A box. We have a team of staff behind the scenes ready to chat with you. And if you'd like to ask any of our speakers a question, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box as well. So, the Bachelor of Science. This degree has 43 majors to choose from, many of them quite practical in nature. And at this point, this is where I have the great pleasure of introducing Associate Professor Deb King, and Deb is going to step us through it. Welcome, Deb.
Thanks so much, Claire, and welcome everybody to the webinar this evening. I'm so pleased that you could join us tonight. It's nighttime for me. I'm not quite sure what time zones you're in watching this webinar from. So before I get started, I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which I'm situated tonight. I'm coming to you from my home in Melbourne, which is located on Wurundjeri land. So it's the same lands on which our Parkville campus is located. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to say to the international students who are watching us tonight, we can't wait for you to come back and join us at the University of Melbourne on our wonderful campus in Parkville or on any of our other campuses to join us in face-to-face learning. Over the last semester, some of our local students have come back on campus in differing ways, and it's been really fantastic to bring the campus back to life. But I can tell you that it's a different campus without all of our international students there, and we really hope that you can come back in the not too distant future. So as you probably already know, that the Bachelor of Science is a diverse degree with an incredible range of majors across 42 different areas. Some of them are foundational science sort of areas that you know about already, like physics and chemistry and mathematics. Others are interdisciplinary areas. There's lots of interdisciplinary information here like data science and so on. There are health science pathways, human structure and function, immunology. Of course, immunology is a very topical thing to be studying at the moment. And of course, all the traditional engineering pathways through the Bachelor of Science. Now, when you come in, it doesn't matter whether you know which major you're going to start with or whether you're still exploring. In your first year and probably in your second year, you'll be doing a whole range of subjects from across different areas of science. And each one of those areas has a different way of teaching in its classes. So what we're going to do tonight is just give you an idea of what different classes they might be and how we've adapted those classes to the online environment to include our international students and, of course, our local students too, because even though, as I said, some of them are back on campus doing some classes, we're not fully back on campus, and so many of our local domestic students and local international students are still experiencing online learning too. So we'll talk about that as we go through. So it doesn't matter which area of science you decide to study, you'll find yourself in a multiple different range of class types. So most areas will have, for example, a lecture. So what's a lecture like at the university? Well, a lecture looks potentially a little bit like this, maybe a lot bigger than this, where students will come in, the lecturer will be up the front, they'll be going through some material, maybe some foundation material, some theoretical material up the front, and there'll be a lot of students in the room and they will be listening to the lecturer, taking notes, maybe participating in the class. They might be answering questions, they might be doing some polls. It's not a complete, one-way transfer of information, but it's generally a big class where there's information provided mainly from up the front of the classroom. Now, our lectures have been obviously put online over this very difficult pandemic period, and by and large, a lot of the lectures will stay online next semester, although there will be some modifications to that, and I'll get to that later on in the presentation. So for most subjects, in addition to a lecture, they will have a small group class called a tutorial. And a tutorial will be in a room potentially like this. Maybe it will be in a room where all the tables are put together and students are working in groups. But in general, it will be a much smaller group of students. So instead of 100 students or 200 or 300 students, it might be 20 students in a group. And the tutorial group will have a single tutor, and that tutor will stay with you through the whole semester. So the tutor and the tutorial is a really important part of the teaching program. It's the place where you will get to know best, potentially, one of the staff members in the subject, because it will be a small group experience. In addition to that, if you're doing a lab science, you might be in a lab class, and the lab classes might be 60 people, it might be 90 people, depending on the discipline area. And you'll go into that lab class, you'll have 1 or 2 demonstrators in the class helping you go through the laboratory exercises, but you'll be doing a hands-on experiment. Now, some of the experiments will be ones that are prescribed, so you'll follow a bunch of steps to get to the outcome, but some are more discovery-based, and so you'll be using your intuition and building the lab yourself and maybe collecting some data. Or in some other cases, you might be in a subject where you go on a field trip. So we have lots of classes where field trips are required, from biosciences to ecology to earth sciences to geography. And the field trips can be local field trips where you might just go for a couple of hours around the Parkville campus or surrounds to collect plants, for example. Or in geography, if you're doing urban geography, you might be looking at landscapes around the Parkville campus. Other field trips might be day trips or even week-long trips interstate or even overseas. Obviously, we can't do overseas field trips at the moment, so that's sort of on hold for a while. And while we've been in lockdown, some of our field trip classes have been put online. Now, that might sound a little bit odd, but they've worked really well. So what's happened is the lecturer has been able to go out and use film of the surrounding areas where the field trip normally is and do like a virtual reality version of the field trip for everybody. So not just for the local students, but for the offshore students as well. So all of these classes have been adapted over time to incorporate or to make them accessible to our international students as well as our local students while they've been in lockdown here in Melbourne. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you a little bit of a snippet of some of the ways that our staff have put their classes online. Now, I have to say that the university went online pretty much with 2 days' notice. So one day we were here at the university giving classes at normal, then we switched from on-campus to online. Staff were given a very short period of time to get the classes online. And I have to say, I am so proud of my colleagues. They did an amazing job getting really difficult things like field trips and lab work online in different ways according to what they could do, what technology was available to do it, and their particular skills and teaching delivery mode. And over time, over the last 3 semesters now nearly, these classes have been refined in different ways and been made better. And now they've got this fantastic way of delivering online material to students around the world in a way that suits them. So the first example that I'm going to show you is Jacinta Denbeston. And Jacinta is the first year coordinator from physics, and she found herself at home trying to figure out how to deliver physics laboratory work to students online. So here, let's hear from Jacinta for a minute.
So the best place to play with water, particularly coloured water, is probably in the bath. I yell at my kids to not make a mess, so I figure I shouldn't probably make a mess either. Okay, so the lecture that I posted last night was about pressure and how we measure pressure. I managed to find some tubing, so I've just got some tubing here, and I've filled some of it with just water that's been coloured red. Now I've got the black tape on there because I thought it'd be easier to see with the tape as a background, but it actually turned out that it was easier to see without the tape. So just ignore that there for the moment. So I've literally built myself a manometer.
So what Jacinta's doing in this class is she's found herself at home and she's decided to put this experiment together with things that she had in her house. And what she's doing now is she's live streaming this lab work to people who are online, and she's asking them questions and they can respond to her through Zoom and answer the questions that she's asking them. And of course, because she's using material that she's got in her house to build this experimental piece of equipment, all the students can find this equipment in their house too. So they can build the same thing in their house and they can go along and do the experiment with her. So that's one way that our staff have put their lab online for students to join in. And as I said, this is real time. So just like you would normally do in a real lab, you could ask Jacinta questions about what was going on with this experiment. So in chemistry, they did it in a slightly different way. So when we went into lockdown, they got special permission to go into the university for 1 week into their chemistry labs, and they filmed labs in lab work in their actual lab. So let's see how that looks. Whoops, sorry about that. Wrong arrow.
In this prac E6, we're looking at acids and bases and the very important chemistry of buffers. We know buffers are hard to understand, so we're going to be looking at them in practice. Part A, titration of a weak base, sodium carbonate, with a strong acid, hydrochloric acid. Using autopipettes, 0.1 molar hydrochloric acid is dispensed into a clean, dry beaker.
So clearly in the chemistry lab, it's a bit different than in a physics situation because we don't expect students to have hydrochloric acid sitting around their house. And even if they did, we wouldn't want them to be using it unsupervised. So it's sort of a different way of going about lab because of the nature of the lab. So you can see that this demonstration looks a bit slicker than Jacinta's, but of course it's not as interactive as Jacinta's, so it's serving a different purpose. But at the end of the lab, students are still going to be able to ask questions, they're given data, and they can still go through and they can do the lab report based on the instruction that they've been given in that lab. And so they can complete the lab during the 3-hour block, just like they would if they were in the lab itself. Now, other labs, you could probably start to build things at home, but this kind of equipment is probably not standard in most students' homes, so it's a little bit trickier to do. So my very sensitive mouse has progressed me to the next page, and this is another example of the way we put things online. Now, this one's close to my own heart, of course, because I'm a mathematician and I've been teaching in the maths school for a very long time. And the way we teach maths in tutorials is when students come into a class, normally face-to-face, none of the instructions happens from the front. All the students do the work themselves, and it's done in a room with whiteboards all around, and the students work in groups on whiteboards on problems that they're given in the class. And a tutor facilitates that work by going around and asking the students questions and helping them in different ways when they get stuck. Of course, when we're not in a face-to-face mode, we can't do that. So what the great people in maths did was found this online platform called AWW, which is a whiteboard type modality. And what they've been able to do is emulate the situation in a tutorial. So they've broken the students in the class up into a number of groups from 1 to 6, and each group has had their own piece of the whiteboard and breakout room so that they could continue to do the work with just a stylus or something that they can write on an interactive screen. So let me show you how that works.
So once students are in a Zoom breakout room, they follow the link that their tutor gave them, which takes them to an online whiteboard like this. It just runs in the browser. No special software required. The whiteboard has a column here for each breakout room. So each group just zooms in on their column. Each column has a copy of the week's questions, any relevant theory, and spaces here for their answers. Students can use the whiteboard's built-in drawing tools to write down their answers. To draw diagrams, etc. And everyone's whiteboards update dynamically, so everyone can see exactly what every other student is up to. So the students in each group can speak to each other and see each other's faces via Zoom and collaborate on the mathematics via the online whiteboard. From the tutor's point of view, the tutor can zoom out and see at a glance where all the different groups are up to. The tutor might be able to.
So as you can see from that, there's lots of different ways to be involved in tutorials. And so the tutor still has oversight of everything that's going on in this classroom. The students can still see what other students are doing, which is a great advantage. If they get stuck, they can see how to progress with the problem. So this was a really good simulation of what we actually do face-to-face. So in those examples, that just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how students can participate in our classes even when they're not with us in a very interactive way. So it's not going to be sitting behind a screen with someone talking at you and you can't ask questions and you can't interact with the class. That's not the way it's working. Of course, lectures also have been coming to students online. And here's an example of one lecture. And this is a lecture that has been pre-recorded and delivered to students in a pre-recorded way. So let me just give you a snapshot of that.
Hi, I'm Peter Vesk and I'm an ecologist. And this video introduces the subject of ecology. This is about the domain of ecology, a nested hierarchy of organisation, and about challenges and approaches to the study of ecology. Australia's First Nations represent the world's oldest living culture.
Sorry, my mouse is very sensitive.
Much of ecology is about understanding the biosphere. Ecology is a science. It's not a philosophy and it's not a way of life. Ecology is about life and death.
So as you can see from Peter's example of that lecture, he's had the lecture pre-recorded, he's delivered it to the students, and that has an advantage in that it doesn't matter what time zone you're in, you can watch that lecture at a time that suits you once it's uploaded. And you can go back over the lecture, you can see what he's saying and play different parts of it at many different times if you didn't understand something that Peter said. There are other different ways of giving lectures too, just like there are in tutorials. So lots of our colleagues gave students lectures like this, but also then used a lecture time where they were actually on camera and live and available to students so that the students could come in and ask them questions based on some of the lecture material. Others were a combination of both, where the staff were actually giving the lecture like I am tonight, so talking to people live, nothing was pre-recorded, students could ask questions, and they did lectures like that throughout the whole semester. What's happening next semester here is, as I said, so a lot of our domestic students are coming back on campus, and we're hoping to get all that small group work back on campus for the students who can come, but then still provide equivalent versions of those classes to offshore students who can't get to the campus. For lectures, some lectures will stay pre-recorded like this one and be available to students on demand, but other classes are bringing some of their lectures back online too, back on campus too. Now, you might say, well, if lectures are back on campus, how am I going to be involved in the lectures that are back on campus? So what we're doing in second semester is the lectures that are back on campus will be live broadcast. So for example, if I was giving this lecture on campus today in Parkville, I would also be live broadcasting it to you, just like you're seeing it now. And you would be seeing it in real time, just like all the other students. And there would be a facility for you to ask me questions, and the questions would be picked up in a live chat, and then they'd be fed through to me so I could answer your questions. Those lectures would also be recorded. So if you're in a time zone that's not suitable for you to come in and watch me when I'm doing it live, the lectures are also available to you after that time, so you can go in and watch them again, or watch them for the first time at a time that suits you, and then the lecturer will make available time for you to be able to ask them questions. So whatever's happening on campus, we're trying our very best to make sure that if you're not on campus with us, you get an experience that is as close to equivalent as we can possibly make it for you. Okay, so I hope that's given you a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on campus and how you're going to be able to participate with us next semester. And I just wanted to end up by talking about the benefits of online learning. Now, I have to say that with anything that you do in education or anything in life, really, there are pros and cons. There are clearly cons to being online. You're not with us, and we find that really difficult. We're not as accessible potentially as we are on campus. It's different talking to your friends on Facebook than it is talking to your friends in the same room. And so you're not able to be able to make face-to-face friendships online either. But there are discussion boards, there are Zoom rooms, there are lots of ways that you can make friends online. And the benefits that have come out of online learning are real benefits that our staff are going to keep even when we're back on campus. So taking the best of online and incorporating it back into on-campus learning. So flexibility, one of the things that's clearly really important for students, especially in different time zones. So you've got the choice of watching a lecture live or watching it later, depending on what you're doing, what other classes you have, or the time zone. You've got easy access to tutors and lecturers because they make live sessions available to you, so you can come in and talk to them at a session that suits you. You can work at your own pace, so you've got a little bit more control about when and how you access the material. You can connect with people from all across the world through a Zoom room in ways that you may not have connected with them before because everybody's involved in the Zoom class. We have chat rooms, all of those kinds of things available for students to be able to participate. And of course, because we're online and there's lots of experts in science that might not be in Melbourne at any given time, because we're doing recorded sessions and sometimes things online, we can get our colleagues from interstate to help us do that. And so we might get guest lecturers doing some of those recorded videos in ways that we couldn't have done before. So lots of pros to online learning. So I hope that's helped to reassure you when you're thinking about what it's going to be like next semester for you studying at the University of Melbourne. Of course, there's other ways of getting support for your online studies, whether they be consultation time, so one-on-one chats with lecturers, tutors, or other staff in consultation hours, discussion boards that you can participate in. There's clubs and societies that are available to you even though you're still online. And of course, we have online academic skills, course planning, and counselling and psychological services available to our online students as well, just like they would be if you were on campus with us. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you so much, Deb. What wonderful insights into the Bachelor of Science for next semester. Before we let you go, is there one piece of advice you would give our students commencing, in a few weeks' time?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Look, I think one piece of advice that I'd give to students is to remember that online learning is a difficult thing for students and staff as well. So any kind of learning is a teaching and learning process. So we might be doing the teaching and the students might be doing the learning, but there's a two-way contract between those two parties. So if we're online, if I'm giving a lecture online, students wouldn't expect that my screen was blank and that I would just be talking to them from a blank screen. They wouldn't be able to connect with me. They wouldn't see my facial expressions. They wouldn't see my crazy hand gestures and talking about vectors pointing up or pointing down or any of that kind of stuff. They would expect me to be live and present. And as a lecturer, I have to say that part of my job, there's a little bit of a performance aspect to it, Claire. And so when I look around a classroom, and I've got a classroom in front of me, a lot of what's going on is I'm doing a little bit of performing to the crowd, but I'm also looking at people's faces. And when I say something, I'm trying to gauge, well, did they understand that? Why is everybody frowning at me? Did I not explain that well? Or they're smiling and I think, okay, they've got that. So when students are online, if their screens are off, then I can't gauge how they're doing. And so that interaction between students and me is really important. So when students come to an online class, I would ask them to be really present, be available, turn your screen on, and let's make it like we're in a classroom. So we're all in it together. So that would be my big tip.
That's a great tip to finish on. Thank you so much, Associate Professor Deb King. It's been fantastic to have you lead this session and give us some valuable insights into the Bachelor of Science. I'll welcome our two students onto the screen now, Massimo and Jasper. I would love to have a chat with you about your program and your experience of studying remotely. Jasper, thanks for joining us. So as a reminder for our audience, Jasper is a psychology major. He's also completing a concurrent diploma of computing and is the recent president-elect of the Science Student Society. Jasper, can you give me a bit of an insight into your remote learning experience? What positives have you seen from the experience that you've had?
Yeah, so in terms of the positives, I think it's just so much easier to get help. In person, when I would go to lectures in first year, I would see like 5 people line up to talk to a lecturer after a lecture. But online, because they pre-record the lectures, they have consultation sessions at the time of the lectures, as well as multiple running throughout the week, as well as the tutors are also available. So it's a lot easier to get help.
Fantastic. And have you had any, challenges or have you seen others have challenges that they've been able to overcome? Give us an insight into perhaps what you might have learnt along the way to make your remote learning perhaps a bit more successful?
Yeah, so I think staying sort of up to date and with all your content can be difficult, and keeping yourself accountable at home. So definitely having a space for where you can study versus a space for where you can relax, as well as because you are online, it's so much easier to contact people. You can really keep yourself accountable if you just maybe set up a study session with one of your friends, and just even if you're just sitting there on Zoom, you know that the other person's there studying with you. And that's something I certainly find helps me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Massimo, you're an electrical systems major. That sounds like a fairly practical major where you would have those laboratory classes that Deb was talking about. Tell us how, I suppose, those classes have been adapted for the last couple of semesters of remote learning. I do have a picture to share that that you sent me, perhaps some of the equipment and laboratory kits that you've been using during this time.
Yeah, so that was actually one of the things a lot of people in my degree were worried about, because my major is very practical. But to my surprise, when lockdown first happened and I was about to start doing the first few subjects where we were going to build our own circuits, that the university sent us like this big box of all those components, even to people who were abroad, not in Australia. And we each had our own kit that we would follow along the workshop demonstrator with and build our own circuits with. So I was just like surprised that even though we're not in campus, we still have access to the same kits and same components that we would have had if lockdown didn't happen.
That's fantastic. And as you say, I mean, you're both in Melbourne at the moment, but even being, even living in Melbourne, you have had periods of remote learning and being unable to come to campus, but still needing to complete this practical work. So, the university has made, significant effort to shift this learning and to be able to provide the same resources and kits. I mean, as you say, even our students overseas received these kits. So it's great to be able to see the different strategies that the faculty were taking to try to replicate these classes. Now, I know that, for many of our students, they're thinking, I think I can handle the academic side of things, but I'm a bit worried about staying connected or meeting new people and making new friends. And university is about so much more than just the 4 subjects each semester. Massimo, can you give me an idea about how you've stayed connected socially and with extracurricular activities?
Yeah, so a lot of the clubs that the university have went online as well. So a lot of activities that we usually see on campus, like trivia nights, a lot of games, they all started to move online, especially when like some mobile games like Among Us got really big during lockdown, and a lot of people started playing that with their tutorial mates. I feel as though even though we couldn't be there in person, everyone just shifted, just like our classes, to online spaces where we could meet. I know that the Science Student Society did a lot of things like that, a lot of connections. I saw a lot of speed friending and speed like meeting and chatting with people online from the university clubs and societies. That was one of the ways actually I was still able to make friends, even though I didn't see a lot of my classmates in person.
Thank you. That's a lovely segue, Jasper. Tell us a little bit about what the Student Society did last year and what you might have planned for the upcoming semester for our students who are about to join. They're looking to build those valuable connections. How can they find out more about you? What opportunities are there to connect in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so last year it was sort of a difficult transition, but we managed to do a couple of trivia sessions, get to know sort of other people in the closer community we did, where everyone sort of gave a fun fact and then you had to guess who it was. In terms of this year, we've been able to do more stuff in person, thankfully, but for O Week at the start of next semester, we'll be doing a speed friending just for online to help you make some new connections for when you do get in person and to stay connected whilst you're still offshore or not at uni. And yeah, beyond that, just all the clubs are really great at adapting to that because they're doing it for themselves as well as you. And UMSU, the student union, run so many activities to keep you connected.
That's wonderful. And I know that there are also, there's quite a large group of peer mentors within the Faculty of Science too. So I know that our commencing students will have that really valuable opportunity to connect with a senior student, perhaps someone in their 2nd or 3rd year like yourselves, to be able to seek that guidance and advice and support. So look, it's really fantastic and a real credit to obviously the academics, but I think also the students to be able to continue to create those opportunities to connect socially and build those valuable networks. I am conscious of time, so I'm going to finish with asking you both what your hot tip, what is your pearl of wisdom that you would like to impart on our audience before we finish today? So what do you know now that you wish that you'd perhaps known a year ago? Maybe it's a tidbit about, you know, being successful studying online, or, you know, cast your mind back to when you commenced your undergraduate degree and, you know, how did you approach, you know, that change and that transition from being a high school student to becoming a university student? Jasper.
Yeah, so I think applicable for both coming in from high school and going into online is it is just what you make of it, and you have to just throw yourself in there and really apply yourself. You know, have your camera on, try and make those conversations, make those connections, because you'll get out of it so much more if you put in more.
Great advice. Thank you so much. And final words, Massimo.
Oh, well, I think I learned that, especially moving to online and being stuck at home more, always establish a routine or try to build a routine that you can stick to, because even though it seems like you have all the time in the world, now that you're stuck at home, time can still slip away and you don't want to not be able to finish things on time or not be able to fulfill commitments. So it's always good to have a good routine that keeps you focused and organized.
Wonderful advice. So that balance between that freedom and flexibility, but still having that self-discipline and routine to get you through to the finish line. To everyone who's tuned in today, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the fact that you've tuned in to find out a bit more about the Bachelor of Science. I thank Associate Professor Deb King, Jasper and Massimo for those wonderful, really valuable insights. Our chat team behind the scenes, who I think have managed to answer quite a number of questions that have been posted. We wish you all the best with the next few weeks, and we really look forward to welcoming you to the University of Melbourne next semester. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.